Reuters, 14th of June 2023, Chinese efforts to catch up in the global competition for electronic espionage. Defense and intelligence specialists claim that China's developing military surveillance network still has a ways to go before it can match the breadth and reach of the US and its allies amid claims that China is extending its electronic eavesdropping capabilities in Cuba, which Beijing has denied. A foreign listening post is what? Large-scale military activities, even in times of peace, necessitate intensive attempts to capture communications and electronic emissions, according to 5 defense and intelligence specialists and 4 diplomats. This is known as signals intelligence, SIGINT. A ballistic missile connecting with its command center, a satellite interacting with its ground station via microwaves, or communications between military commanders might all be potential targets. Each produces data that can be exploited to one's advantage when fighting. Retired military personnel claim that even if the transmissions cannot be decrypted, monitoring the volume and timing of signals might yield crucial intelligence. Electronic signatures produced by jamming tools and radars can also be recorded. The use of mobile phone networks and fiber optic connections has complicated SIGINT efforts, yet radio communication is still often used by militaries. However, land-based stations broaden a nation's breadth and reach. Large militaries deploy ships, surveillance aircraft, satellites, and occasionally submarines capable of capturing such signals. The Five Eyes listening posts of the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as the long-standing American military presence in the Indo-Pacific, which includes locations in Taiwan, Guam, and Diego Garcia, a British territory, are the focal points of the vast global military surveillance network that the United States and its allies operate. Why postpone a single listening post in Cuba? The People's Liberation Army values the Cuba station for several reasons. It brings Florida's military and commercial space launches and several sizable Army and Navy bases within reach of the east coast of the United States. According to a retired military officer with experience in similar operations, Cuba's closeness to the equator may make it simpler to monitor geostationary military satellites. Additionally, it would enable China to monitor the growth of SpaceX's Starlink satellite network, a communication system heavily utilized by Ukrainian forces in their fight with Russia, which Moscow calls a special operation. According to Carl Thayer, a professor at the Australian Defence Force Academy of the Australian National University, the Cuba station opened a new front in the SIGINT conflict even though PLA surveillance was still well behind the US and its allies in terms of reach. He said that a significant, permanent presence in Cuba is an important symbol, getting right under the noses of the US and reflecting China's global ambitions, in addition to monitoring capabilities. The Ministry of Defense refuses to comment regarding China's expanding spying capabilities. According to Reuters, the Chinese military oversaw an Argentine space monitoring station in 2019. What presently exists in China? According to defense analysts and diplomats following China's military modernization, Beijing has numerous Chinese mainland and Hainan Island listening sites. However, its broader offshore activities are still under development. According to 2018 research by the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, IISS, China established new SIGINT infrastructure extending far into Southeast Asia after seizing and strengthening a string of contested reefs in the South China Sea over the previous 10 years. Along with smaller maritime surveillance vessels, early warning and surveillance aircraft, and massive space tracking ships deployed in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, China runs its own Beidou system of global navigational satellites. According to the US Military Balance, China has 207 satellites in orbit, 86 of which are used for SIGINT and early warning purposes. The tracking ships, which can monitor satellite and ballistic missile launches, are run by the PLA's growing Strategic Support Force, SSF, according to a Pentagon study on China's military from 2022. According to the study, the SSF also has tracking and command facilities in Namibia, Pakistan, Kenya, and Argentina. According to regional diplomats, China lacks an American-style network of alliances and partnerships that may support covert monitoring efforts as it develops a global military intelligence network. Elsewhere, could China build them? However, some Western officials say they anticipate Chinese diplomatic pressure for facilities in the South Pacific and across the Indian Ocean. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken did not mention any other nations China was considering for listening stations in his remarks on Monday. According to the Pentagon assessment, China has likely considered building military logistics centers in 14 nations, including Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, and Angola. The Chinese Ministry of Defense refuses to comment. According to Singapore-based defense researcher Alexander Neil, this trend will continue to expand along with China's worldwide influence. China must develop a new SIGINT capability wherever it raises its military presence.